Phyllis is not older than I am.
It's a battle of the ages. 85 years old. Right?
Willis just looks older.
After hearing all this, I'm not sure that it's appropriate to talk about my being an entrepreneur, although I must do it. 5 minutes. 60, 70 years ago, I started it. I really published my first book at the age of 22 because somebody showed me the possibilities for publication. And then along came something else, television. I went to Nashville, Tennessee and asked a company if they'd sponsor a program while I was getting my master's and doctorate at the University of Illinois, if they'd put me on television, since I was a minister too. The Washington Manufacturing Company did, and I had that for a number of years. I got my master's and doctorate from the University of Illinois, came to Florida because a friend talked me into coming to help start a college in Temple Terrace. I taught there and was head of the philosophy department at the University of Tampa. I always enjoyed the field of philosophy. That's what my master's and doctorate are in. But I got fired the same week, 2 churches, 2 schools, for daring to take seriously what my mother, the mother of 8, in a poor section of Kentucky had said to me long before. Don't you forget the practical things that your father preaches every Sunday and teaches all the time. He was school superintendent and had a few acres for us to live on in the Depression. I was standing at the counter when he put down a dime and 3 cents and said to Mother, we don't have anything else, the bank's closed today. That was 1931. We lived, never were hungry, because we've always worked on that farm and provided. Now, my experience as an entrepreneur, number one, I was an entrepreneur in the field of religion, church work. I would do whatever it took to promote what we were doing rightly, and I believe it succeeded. But when I got into teaching, I was asked to give up the idea that all races were equal, and I made the mistake of preaching in Tampa. Practical, my mother had said the book of James is the most practical book you ought to read, study, memorize. I did, and the sermon, have not the faith with respect to persons. There was an associate, helper of Nick Newsill, mayor in Tampa, who wanted to be a member of my church. And I announced it at the morning service and was glad. And that afternoon the officers called me and said, change your mind or don't come back. I didn't have a choice. There wasn't a single church that would allow me to promote racial equality.
Wow.
Besides being an entrepreneur in the field of teaching, I was then in the field of economic opportunity. I went to Washington. I became the director of the first domestic Peace Corps training program, VISTA. We trained probably 1,000 volunteers right up here in Tallahassee in a migrant labor camp. And it was a great thing to be a part of that, but the newspapers were divided. Tampa Tribune hated me and the St. Pete Times defended me. I made the mistake of interviewing Eleanor Roosevelt on my program called Your United Nations and WTVT in Tampa, and because of things she said that were positive about my work, again, that made me a communist in the eyes of the John Birch Society. 4 members of the board at the University of Tampa were members of that society, and they all thought I was a communist. People stopped my daughter on Bayshore Boulevard where we lived and said, how can you stand that communist daddy of yours? I went into, when I was fired, I went into real estate. Why? I had a good student whose father owned a big real estate company in Tampa, And he said, go to Orlando, take the exam, come back, and go to work for him. I did exactly that the first week I was fired. I had 4 kids to feed, so we had to do something. Came back, went to work for him, and in real estate it was wonderful. Then, from being, and by the way, in Sarasota itself, my partner and I have done some shopping centers and so forth I could talk about at length. And in the interim period, though, I went to Clearwater, was head of the Community Service Foundation, did much work in the field of economic opportunity, setting up all over Florida, daycare centers, Saturday programs for the enlargement of opportunities for students. We had a big one in St. Petersburg and other places. Besides that, after the real estate business really peaked and then died down a little bit, I also had a little securities firm. We raised some capital for 2 old engineers out the airport who invented a radio receiver, specialized one, and they patented it, and I knew from my work in Washington it would be used in the chemical stockpile disposal program. After a few months, these engineers came to me and said, Pat, please take it over and do something with it. They knew how to invent, they didn't know how to market. I had enough contacts that I did put in the bid for the first contract on those in Kentucky, got that bid, and sold 20,000 of those radios. If any of you are interested, I have a thing here that tells about our work then. Alabama was the biggest contract. We got that finally after competing, I would say viciously, having competition with TRW and others. But we got it and sold 100,000 radios there. And then that program itself, the chemical stockpile disposal program with 8 major sites in the United States for those chemicals to be destroyed, that's dying down. So, seeing that coming, we said, what do we do next? My kids tell me I ought to think about retiring someday. But that's what I don't want to do with this program the way it is. We went international. We hired an international president. I stepped down as president, became vice chairman of the board. I'm still CEO, but we are doing some things that must be done by somebody. When 9/11 occurred, the policemen and firemen couldn't communicate with each other because they were on different frequencies. My engineers developed an activation system that not only activates different frequencies but different instruments, and this tells about it here. In fact, we met with FEMA this week on the development they'll be announcing before long of a nationwide, maybe they hope worldwide, but nationwide program called IPAWS, which is an integrated public warning announcement system. This is different about it. We work with several companies where we can activate the different frequencies, the different instruments, and that's what's needed because they couldn't do that then. And it's needed over the world. We are working with them and hope to continue to do that. I want to just say, when my mother taught me some things I wrote down about what it means to succeed as an entrepreneur. She didn't call it that. She said, I'm telling you what you got to do. You live in the country. But this is the issue of security, sales, and integration, the last article in it, and it's a meaningful article, but at the end of it, it says, what does all this mean? If you're just starting a job, selling your company, or undergoing some career-related events, here's the way to face it. Number one, accept the reality of the situation. Accept the reality. Number two, instead of resisting, embrace things that are new and different to you. Third, regardless of how hard it will be, give the changes taking place in your life a chance to work, and they probably will. That's happened in my life.
You want to ask him what he would do differently in his entrepreneurial life if he had to do it over?
Yeah.
Anybody?
Yes. Tell us.
What would you do differently? Can you hear me?
It's a loaded question. It's a loaded question.
I wish I knew the answer to your question. What I would have done differently when I was fired from the universities, I might have accepted one of the jobs offered me in other cities. I refused to leave town when I was fired from those two schools and churches. I refused to leave town, and I thought it best to stay there and fight the battle. Never have been sure whether that was exactly the thing I should have done or sought help. I got plenty of help. Eleanor Roosevelt sent a letter to the president of the university defending me, and Governor Collins did. Do you think it did any good with the 4 board members that were members of the John Bird Society? Heck no, didn't do any good at all.
Fighting the windmills.
Willis.
Your radio system, it's essentially an early warning system for like evacuations, etc.?
The difference, there are plenty of radios like that, but the difference for these engineers' invention was that this is a tone alert radio. I have one in the car I could show you, but here's plenty of description of it in these brochures. The tone goes out, and it will, every radio, individual radio has a number. And for example, the base around Anniston is divided into 13 zones. All the radios in that zone also have a zone number. The tone alert is specified to open either one radio or the zone or an all alert, all call. And that means that if you need to warn about something, you don't have to disturb the whole community the way you did before with all the sirens and radios. You simply go to the place or the places where the danger occurs. That's the main thing that was different about it. We've gone far beyond that now for this other activation system I'm talking about.
I have a question. What do you owe your mental acuity to at your age? Some people owe it to drinking good bourbon, you know.
Hey, that's probably it. I grew up in Kentucky.
I would love to make the observation. One, I'd like to thank anybody that's
Louder.
well. I would like to thank anybody that still participates in this group. That we've got guys like Ron Klein. I think Ron's 75 years old and rides his bike. He has spinal stenosis, some 30, 40 miles a day. But I believe, I mean, just based on all the people that I see coming and going into the restaurant, and there are hundreds of them all the time, and you see some people retiring, and then you see some people choosing not to retire, that I sure see a heck of a lot more life in these people that choose not to sit there and just say, I'm just going to fish, I'm just going to do this. You know, you continue to be productive. One, I think that's what God expects us to do. But I just have tremendous respect for you for staying in the game and continuing to produce the way that you